Hello everyone. So this is a video that I wanted to make for quite some time now, and it's a video of course about the sorts of points raised by vegan activists. And I think like the straw that broke the camel's back for me in making this video was hearing the notable now vegan critic and commentator Alex J. O'Connor say on a podcast that we need to normalise plant-based agriculture. And I think when it comes to making statements like that, I think really it's a mark of the central problem, I think, with the ideological stance of the vegan movement, and that a lot of it is built out of quite a lot of naivety. And I think we need to normalise plant-based agriculture. I think you need to take a look at the world. One of the things like what you've never seen a wheat field or arable farming in the 21st century. Well, that is obviously plant-based agriculture. I take a look at the American Midwest and the huge wheat farming operations out there in Canada, and for that matter in the UK, and well, we've obviously normalised plant-based agriculture. You know, cornstarch, that's in more, well, it's in loads and loads of food products. Also, that all comes from maize, and yeah, like we've been farming plant-based. Well, in plant-based agriculture, we've been farming for in excess of 10,000 years. It is normalised. It's as normalised as animal agriculture, and also, furthermore, in a sense, animal agriculture is plant-based agriculture also, since animals, of course, all the livestock that we farm need to be fed plants. So yeah, I think there's a great deal of naivety involved in vegan activist movement. I wouldn't have said that their hearts are in the wrong places. And really, when it comes to any sort of movement that seeks to push forward the cause of animal welfare and animal rights, that's something that I would wholeheartedly support, I think. But really, doing that within the context of a movement that seeks to rid the planet of animal agriculture, I just think that I think you're being highly unrealistic, rather naive. I mean, not say in the West, say it's possible in the West to remove animal agriculture. I suspect it isn't for all sorts of reasons I'll get into in due course. But what about, say, in the Middle East? Big sort of herding cultures out there, say, Afghanistan or Morocco. You know, like herding animals really is their sort of way of life, since they can't, well, due to the climate, due to the terrain and so on, they can't engage in the same sorts of crop-based arable farming operations that we have here in the West. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, if you go to different places in the world, the geography is different, hence you come across different types of agriculture. And there's like that they need to take into account. It's like, for one thing, that based on what the sorts of things they've been saying, they're rather ignorant, I'd have said, of farming here in the West, and their aim is to establish a vegan planet. And I just wonder, well, how much do you know about farming in the rest of the world then? And I think it's a case of a little knowledge being a dangerous thing. And then you've got activists like Earthling Ed coming out and saying dairy calves are taken away from their mothers at birth to maximise profits by selling the milk that would otherwise be going to the calf. There are lots of good reasons, very good reasons, why calves are separated from their mothers at birth. The main reason is actually to feed the calf colostrum from their mother, which, if a calf and its mother are left to their own devices, it's been shown that the calf will not consume the necessary amount of colostrum within that sort of crucial 24-hour period to build immunity against disease, and will likely succumb to disease and die. So, so I've worked on dairy farms, and what are calves fed? They are fed milk. They're fed milk very often from the tank or from milk concentrates, which is just dehydrated cow's milk with a few other additives in them. So they are still fed milk. and that's something that is completely untrue. And I think really, the earthling egg would be, and also they're separated from their mothers at birth. Like, what are you going to do? You're going to put them in with the rest of the herd, the milking herd. They're going to get battered about and knocked about by by cows. They're going to be exposed to lower temperatures. It'll be damper, more disease, rather than a warm, crucially dry environment that they need in a calf shed. So yeah, and obviously they're raised as replacements for the dairy herd if they're female. So it benefits a farmer nothing to frankly have a bunch of dead calves on his hands. Because then you lose your replacements for the herd, and then you've got to buy in calves, which is expensive. And yeah, it is, yes, designed to maximise profitability, but very often it turns out in farming that the cause of maximising profitability does go hand in hand with welfare concerns. And given how, at least in the UK, how monitored and regulated by both the government organisations and non-government organisations farming is, you've got things like RSPCA assurance and Red Tractor, and so these sorts of assurance schemes that go along with farming and regulating the produce on farms. It's a lot of effort is put into ensuring that animals are well looked after and well taken care of, and that welfare standards are high, and they're very high here in this country, fortunately. So, welfare concerns are something that farming is taken very seriously in farming, say in dairy farming. If you expose your animals to greater levels of stress, they'll become more susceptible to disease. So a lot of effort is put into ensuring that animals remain as stress-free as possible. And it goes for all sorts of things as well, as physical and psychological stress. So a lot of effort is put into the design and infrastructure of dairy farms and the housing for cattle, such as cubicle sheds, because otherwise they'll put too much stress on their feet, or they won't spend the optimum amount of time lying down, which is another sort of important consideration, and that sort of goes hand in hand with consideration put into what they're bedded with, and you don't want, ideally, them putting too much pressure on their feet too often on the concrete. You find in dairy herd yards, otherwise they'll develop foot problems, which could be a really big difficulty if you've got loads of cows going down with lameness of one form or another. That could be a nightmare, basically. And that also, again, feeds into milk yield, for one thing. Milk quality is also impacted by animals undergoing stress, impacts things like other diseases that they could get as well, and of course a hell of a lot of money and time in dairy farming, which is, I think, more what I have experience in, is put into ensuring that animals firstly don't get ill to begin with, and if they do get ill, curing them of their illnesses. So it's sort of an ongoing struggle, a battle, it seems, to prevent things like mastitis and all sorts of other illnesses. Mastitis is a pretty big one, though. It's one of the main ones that is sort of a constant thing in dairy farming. And so if welfare concerns go hand in glove with concerns related to profitability, since also if it's sort of found out that you're taking a slipshod attitude towards animal welfare, you run the risk of, firstly producing milk that's of a substandard quality or less milk, and then you go against the terms of your milking contract, for instance, and you can go out of business that way, or government inspectors come around, find out that you're not treating animals well and shut you down for that reason, or you lose your assurance scheme if you're on a red tractor or something like that, and that can be devastating as well and can be very hard to recover from if you're a farmer. And yeah, so a lot of effort is pointed into ensuring that animals on farms are well looked after and well taken care of. And really, in my experience, I've never been on a dairy farm that I would consider to be substandard, really, on any level when it comes to animal welfare. Really, like, I did sort of see one time, actually, a cow getting really, like, rather distressed when her calf was taken away from her. But I've seen also calves being taken away from their mother pretty routinely all the time, and I've only seen it that once. And I think maybe it's something to do with her being an older cow, and that was like her last calf, more than likely. And I don't know, but it's unusual to see that. And yeah, it was distressing for me to see it. But really, I think when it comes to cows and on that issue of calves, like, I think I credit cows with having, enough good sense to realise that the best place for the calf probably isn't with the mother and being with the rest of the herd and so on. And yeah, they left to their own devices, they will not consume enough colostrum to build that immunity. It would seem, well, that's what the research would seem to indicate. So that's why that happens. And do I think it's cruel? I think the alternative is crueler. So yeah. And another sort of point I think that vegans like to make, they draw this distinction or draw this false binary, I think, between animal agriculture, and plant-based agriculture. Sort of what, well, we in farming would refer to as arable farming versus livestock production, for instance. But really, and you see all sorts of farming operations which incorporate elements of arable farming and livestock farming. Then you get operations which is solely arable, and you get operations which are more like solely livestock production. And it's, yeah, the two systems, far from being separated or separable, I think, go together or there's certainly feedback loops between the two, and they go together sort of more or with a greater level of cohesion than I think vegan activists would like to make out or like to appreciate. Since and they make this big point that in arable farming, plant-based agriculture, quotes, 80% of what's produced goes to animals, and they bring up this point as if that's all food that humans could be eating, and it's being wasted. It's being wasted pointlessly on animals. I was like, no, it isn't. That's for instance, if you're farming a crop of maize, we take the cob of the maize plant, if you know what I mean. And that goes into the production of cornstarch and things for human consumption, whereas the stalk of the maize plant, that gets turned into silage for cattle, which we can't consume. We can't consume that stuff. Likewise with barley, the stalks of barley, that goes into making straw for animal bedding, and we haven't really figured out how to derive anything with any nutritional value for humans from it. If we had, we would be doing that though, because we could make more money that way, more than likely, if you see what I mean. And I was watching this documentary the other day, it popped up with my YouTube recommendations about mushroom farming, commercial mushroom farming, and they made the point in the mushroom farming videos that, this is very popular with vegans at the moment, so the market for mushrooms is sort of booming. And they do bring up in the video also that what mushrooms are grown in is, well, chicken shit, animal manure. So, and they can't really be grown in anything else, or nothing else that they could be grown in really would be commercially viable. I know that you get models where you can have mulching and things like this, or kelp and seaweed, and I know that there exist potential alternatives to the use of animal manures, but when it comes to commercial viability and the scalability of those sorts of prerequisites for growing mushrooms, I think you'd run into a great deal of trouble trying to adapt those sorts of things large scale, if you see what I mean. And again, if it were possible, we would be doing it. You know, if that sort of business model were viable, farmers, in the interest of saving money, yeah, would be looking into like those sorts of alternatives. But it turns out that it's not viable. Or it turns out that it's less less viable than you'd like to suspect. And I don't know. I think maybe the final point I'm going to raise on this is that I know that a lot of vegans, particularly younger ones, I think, tend to find that, yeah, you can very easily eat a perfectly nutritious diet that is solely plant and fungi based and live perfectly happily. But what I've been looking into more is that a lot of people in middle age and later middle age, they tend to be moving away from that sort of diet because of health concerns, and I remain unconvinced that it is as good for you as a healthy, balanced diet with an element of meat within the diet. Meat is very good for us. It contains, you know, all sorts of amino acids, complex fats, protein, crucially, iron, etc. And yeah, it seems to have been what our species consumes, or has had a tendency to consume, in the sort of 250,000 years that we've been in existence as a species. It seems to be what our common ancestors eat quite often, or our closest common ancestor, chimpanzees, are omnivores. So yeah, it's, I think, and also there's this issue of bone fractures with consuming a vegan diet. You know, getting more brittle bones, which I can't see as a good thing. And also, like Earthling Ed once said on one of his videos, that I know winter's a very difficult time for vegans. I'm like, oh, I know why that is. You know, it's because you've lost all your subcutaneous fat. You know, you put your body into ketosis, and that's why. And yeah, it must be a difficult time for vegans. And also, if you're trying to consume the amount of energy you need to keep yourself warm in the winter without that subcutaneous fat, I really wouldn't recommend it. That sounds very unhealthy to me. You know, your body's got insulation in the form of fats, so you need to consume less food as a result of it. And then there's other things like B12 deficiencies and so on. And there's, I think, and also like with athletes, I think I've come across a few examples of vegan athletes. For instance, Lewis Hamilton's gone vegan. But then in the case of Lewis Hamilton, I imagine going vegan actually would confer a competitive advantage on him, since he's a Formula One driver, so every gram of weight that he loses would give him an advantage. And then there's like Venus Williams, she's gone vegan apparently, but I think she's really more at the end of her career if she hasn't retired already. And then there's the MMA fighter James Wilkes, who went vegan, and but I think he went vegan really at about the same sort of time he was retiring. And if you look at James Wilkes also, he does look like a very in shape guy, but he looks like a very in shape guy who spent about 6 weeks stranded at sea, if you know what I mean. Again, very dry looking, very without that subcutaneous fat, and doesn't look healthy. Looks like he's lacking water mass in his body. He looks dehydrated. I can't imagine that that's a good thing for you. If a vegan diet, if you're undertaking any form of professional sport, I can't see how it would be good. And I know this firsthand because my sister was, she's a marathon runner, and an ultra runner almost, and very good. She's been winning races all over the place, and she sort of started eating a vegan, or not really a vegan diet as such, but something approaching that, I think. And she got injured a few times. I think more when she was in the sort of more towards the extremes of that. And you get like I think she may have been picking up nutrition advice from the likes of Scott Jurek, who's this ostensibly vegan ultra runner, who apparently has never had any health complaints or injuries, but if he hasn't, he will be supplementing his diet incredibly carefully and rigidly, and sort of designing all of his training plans around that diet, and sort of, yeah, it espouses, I think, the possibility that vegan diets can work. But then again, I had to say, when it comes to sort of fitness and nutrition and all this sort of stuff, in the States particularly, I think you get one or two charlatans, don't you? People who are sort of making these big claims about this diet works, and is this fad, and then there's another one, and then there's another one, and there's always some sort of guide you've got to buy or some program you've got to get on, and it's all for, ultimately, I think, and there's a lot of bullshit out there as well, I don't know, but really for a vegan for any sort of professional sport, I think you need all sorts of things in your diet that meat serves as a very good means of getting in your diet. You know, like calcium, magnesium, iron, selenium, B12, the other B vitamins, and vegans are a big thing is a B12 deficiency with they need to supplement B12. And selenium deficiencies also, I think, is a big thing reported. And I don't see it being a good thing for people. I don't. And I think it's built out of a highly unrealistic and there's a bit of overzealousness there, I think, with this push towards the elimination wholesale of animal agriculture from the planet. And I just think about the amount of people employed by it, not just within, you've got farming itself, one thing, sure, but not all that many people work on farms, really. Then there's the industry surrounding it. If you take agriculture, there's sort of a whole industry, it employs about 3% of the population. But that's not just people working on farms, that's people working sort of in all the industries connected to agriculture. And then there's food services, which employ a huge number of people. That's an industry I've also worked in. And it's... And then people working in food processing and supermarkets and everything else. And just all, like butchers, for instance, they're all going to go out of business, aren't they? Anyone with a chip shop, they're going to go out of business. Unless they convert to a vegan chip shop or something. And then you've got like food processing, you've got infrastructure. The big problems with like infrastructure there also. And how are you going to establish the infrastructure to create all this new vegan food? And also what sort of system of governance is going to have to take over to prevent things emerging, like for instance a black market in meat and animal products. Are we talking about a sort of a totalitarian system possibly? I wouldn't have advocated that sort of thing. But when it comes to sort of overzealous ideologues, there is a tendency to produce totalitarian systems, and I think that may be one of larger dangers with following this sort of thinking. I think there is one vegan country, I think, in the world at the moment, and that is North Korea, where it's not totally vegan, of course, but it is probably, I think, in the case of most people living there, they don't have access to meat because it's taken by, if there's any meat being produced there at all, it'll be taken by the military and the higher echelons of North Korean society, which is, yeah, it's a dreadful shame, really. And yeah, maybe that's all I want to say on it.